The murder of Thomas Becket. Born in 1119 London, England, at the age of 23, Thomas Becket entered the service of Archbishop Theobald of Canterbury, the highest Catholic churchman in all of England. Studying canon law in Bologna and Auxerre, upon Becket's return, Theobald promoted Becket to the role of diplomatic negotiator between the Church and the English crown. Ordained as an archdeacon in 1154, King Henry II named Becket Chancellor of England that same year, serving for the next 7 as an English statesman and diplomat, even as a soldier when he led troops into battle against the French in an effort to regain lands once in the possession of Henry's queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Developing a strong bond with the king, even supporting Henry's disagreements with the church, when Becket was named Archbishop of Canterbury on June 2, 1162, Becket soon shifted his allegiance from the king to the Pope and the church, leading to years of escalating conflicts between King Henry and England's highest religious authority. When 4 knights overheard the king shout, "Who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?" the knights took him seriously, entering Canterbury Cathedral on December 29, 1170. When Becket refused the knights' repeated orders to travel to Westminster to give account of his offenses against king and country, the knights rained 2 mighty sword blows down upon Becket's head, prompting Becket to utter, "For the name of Jesus and the protection of the church, I am ready to embrace death." A 3rd blow to Becket's head ended his life, a blow so powerful that it broke the sword. The sight of Becket's unjust murder soon drew a cult-like stream of outraged Christian pilgrims to a shrine set up in Canterbury Cathedral in Becket's honor, including a contrite King Henry II who walked barefoot in sackcloth to pay his respects to the fallen priest. Beatified by Pope Alexander III on February 21, 1173, as the cult of Thomas Becket continued to grow throughout the Middle Ages, King Henry VIII put an end to the cult and the Catholic Church in 1538, installing the Church of England after the Pope refused to annul Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Destroying Becket's shrine that same year, a simple candle now marks the spot where the shrine had stood for centuries, making the murder of Thomas Becket a lasting stain on the British monarchy. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln. On April 9, 1865, after 4 years of bloody warfare that cost the lives of 620,000 Americans, Confederate General-in-Chief Robert E. Lee and his Army of Northern Virginia officially surrendered to the Union Army of the Potomac under the commanding general of the United States. The surrender took place at the McLean House in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, after one of the final battles of the Civil War. Less than a week later, the American nation would shudder at the loss of one of its most historic and impactful leaders. On April 14, 1865, after a long day tending to the nation's business, the 16th American president and his wife Mary went to Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. to take in the wildly popular stage play comedy, Our American Cousin. Due to his national fame as a stage actor, Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth maintained ready access to all parts of Ford's Theater, using his carte blanche access for the planned assassination of President Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and Secretary of State William H. Seward. While Booth's co-conspirator Lewis Powell was tasked with killing Seward, George Atzerodt was tasked with killing the vice president. Arriving late to the theater with Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris, the play was interrupted so that the orchestra could play Hail to the Chief as the packed house of some 1,700 theatergoers rose in applause. As the play resumed, Booth, who knew the play by heart, entered the Lincoln skybox from behind, timing his lone shot to coincide with one of the funniest lines of the play. As laughter pealed throughout the theater, Booth approached the president and shot him in the back of the head with a 6-inch single-shot Derringer. The bullet entered Lincoln's skull behind his left ear, passed through his brain, and came to rest near the front of his skull, fracturing both his orbital plates. Major Rathbone jumped from his seat and struggled with Booth, who dropped his Derringer and drew a knife, stabbing Rathbone in his left forearm. Rathbone again grabbed at Booth just as the assassin jumped from the skybox to the stage. A 12-foot drop, but not before one of his spurs became entangled with the Treasury flag decorating the Lincoln skybox. Booth's fall to the stage was a painful one, landing him awkwardly on his left foot, but as he began to cross the stage, many in the audience thought he was part of the play and began to laugh. Before Booth fled into the night, most eyewitness accounts indicate that Booth held up his bloody knife and yelled "Sic semper tyrannis," which is Latin for "thus always to tyrants." With the help of 3 doctors in attendance that night, the comatose president was moved across the street to a first-floor bedroom in Tailor William Peterson's house. More physicians arrived to offer aid, but the 16th President of the United States left this earth the following day at 7:22 in the morning. Lincoln's death was mourned around the world. Hundreds of thousands attended his funeral procession through the streets of Washington, D.C. on April 19th, followed by a 1,700-mile train ride procession from New York to Lincoln's hometown of Springfield, Illinois, often passing trackside tributes in the form of bands, bonfires, and hymn singing. The hunt for the conspirators quickly became the largest in U.S. history, involving thousands of federal troops and countless civilians. Booth was cornered by the 16th New York Cavalry while the assassin was sleeping in a barn in Virginia. A lone soldier snuck up behind him and shot Booth in the back of the head, a just reprisal for what the assassin had done to the President of the United States. Many of Booth's co-conspirators were freed after lengthy trials, while Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George Atzerodt were hanged by the neck on June 30th, 1865. The assassination of President McKinley. Elected president in 1896 against Democratic rival William Jennings Bryan, William McKinley successfully led the nation back to prosperity after the Panic of 1893, as well as leading the military to victory in the Spanish-American War, which saw the Spanish colonies of Puerto Rico and the Philippines handed over to the United States. Re-elected handily in a rematch against Bryan in 1900, McKinley was poised for another 4 years of high popularity, along with his second-term vice president, Theodore Roosevelt. Despite the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln in 1865 and James Garfield in 1881, McKinley frequently chose to sideline his security detail so that the president could mingle with the American people any chance he could get. During a long trip scheduled for the months following his second inauguration, McKinley scheduled major speeches intending to promote his plan for more protective tariffs on foreign goods, culminating with a speech at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. When McKinley's wife Ida became gravely ill on a cross-country train trip, McKinley postponed his visit to the exposition, finally making his way to Buffalo on September 5, 1901. On September 5th, while McKinley and his wife disembarked their private car at the Buffalo train station, anarchist George Chogas made his first secretive attempt on the president's life, but finding McKinley too well guarded, he dropped back for a second attempt on September 6. An immigrant from Poland, Chogas regarded McKinley as a symbol of wealth and oppression over the working man, and when McKinley reached to shake Chogas's hand in the reception line at the exposition, Chogas shot the president twice in the abdomen with a concealed pistol he kept wrapped in a linen napkin. In the days following his injuries, McKinley appeared to be recovering. However, he died of gangrene on September 14th, making him the third sitting American president to lose his life to an assassin's bullet. After Chogas was executed by means of electrocution, in 1906, Congress passed legislation designating the Secret Service as the agency in charge of all future presidential security. the Nazis' plot to assassinate the Big Three. By November of 1943, German war leaders understood that victory against the Allies was a near impossibility. Yet the longer they continued to wage war, most German leaders felt that their continued belligerence would lead to greater bargaining power at an eventual peace table. Thanks to intercepted communications among Allied personnel, German officials were well aware of plans for a highly secretive meeting between the Allies' Big Three leaders, President Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, Winston Churchill of Great Britain, and Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union. And after SS Captain Otto Skorzeny led a commando team that freed Italian fascist Benito Mussolini from his imprisonment at a well-guarded hotel, Hitler appointed Skorzeny to head Operation Long Jump with the sole objective of eliminating the Big Three. Thanks to declassified documents from Russian intelligence known as the NKVD, British intelligence, and Wehrmacht archives, German officials intercepted a communique between the British Embassy in Ankara and the Foreign Office in London, indicating that the meeting between the Big Three was set to take place in Tehran on November 28, 1943, leading to a clandestine Nazi insertion of 44 commandos in multiple airdrops in and around Tehran. 36 were killed by waiting Russian troops before the commandos hit the ground, while 2 captured commandos confessed that 6 more were unaccounted for. Housed in 3 separate locations around Tehran, when Mike Riley, FDR's head of security, learned about the still at-large commandos, together with Russian intelligence agents, all involved agreed that the Big Three should be moved to the safety of the Russian embassy, at the same time issuing a $20,000 reward, some $350,000 in today's currency, for information leading to the arrest of the Nazi commandos. On November 30th, the third day of the conference, Riley and others responsible for the Big Three's security knew that Churchill's planned 69th birthday dinner at the British Embassy that night was ready-made for a Nazi attack. Yet before the party was set to go off, an Iranian informant came forward to claim the reward money, informing Russian agents that the commandos were holed up at a Tehran safe house. Under Russian orders, the Iranian informant returned to the safe house and offered an ultimatum to the commandos: either surrender with your hands up or prepare to be slaughtered like pigs. Moments later, a massive explosion leveled the building in an act of mass suicide by all 6 Nazi commandos, ending one of the most dramatic, if not surreal moments in World War II history. The July 20 plot. Before the outbreak of World War II, attempts by German resistance groups to assassinate Adolf Hitler had all but failed in ending the dictator's life, leading Hitler to become increasingly paranoid over the recurring threats to his life, adding layers of armed guards for his protection, while frequently making last-minute changes to his schedule. As war raged throughout Europe, a group of high-ranking German military leaders began to recognize that Hitler's suicidal two-front war would lead to the total destruction of Germany at the hands of advancing Allied forces, opting instead for yet another assassination attempt before staging a coup d'etat against remaining Nazi leaders. Led by Generals Ludwig Beck, Friedrich Olbricht, Henning von Tresckow, and Lieutenant Colonel Klaus Stauffenberg, during a planned meeting at Hitler's Wolf's Lair bunker on July 20, 1944, Stauffenberg planted a briefcase packed with high explosives under a conference table to be used for the upcoming high-level meeting with the Fuhrer, departing the room on a trumped-up story about taking an important phone call. Unbeknownst to Stauffenberg, another officer moved the briefcase away from Hitler's seat before the bomb detonated at 12:42 that afternoon. 4 people were mortally wounded, while Hitler suffered only minor injuries, remaining well enough to keep an appointment with Benito Mussolini before giving the Italian dictator a tour of the bomb site. In the aftermath of the attempted assassination, Stauffenberg and Albrecht were arrested and executed the following day, while some 200 others were eventually tried and executed for treason against the Nazi regime. Erwin Rommel was also linked to the plot, but was given the choice of standing trial or committing suicide in an effort to spare his family. Opting for the latter, the Nazis covered up the true cause of death for the renowned field marshal before honoring him with a state funeral, making the July 20 plot a near miss for the Allies' fight against Nazi aggression. The assassination of John F. Kennedy. With election season fast approaching, on November 22, 1963, First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy joined her husband on a 10-mile motorcade through Dallas, Texas, in a convertible Lincoln Continental limousine, waving to an enthusiastic crowd that lined the parade route. Along for the ride sat Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie, when at 12:30 in the afternoon, as their limo passed the Texas School Book Depository building, 3 shots rang out from a 6th-floor window, ending the life of the 35th President of the United States and seriously wounding Governor Connally.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded.
A flash from Dallas. 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead of bullet wounds. This is the latest information we have from Dallas. I will repeat with the greatest regret, 2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he has died of bullet wounds.
John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas.
For those Americans alive at the time, the tragic murder of the Commander-in-Chief gutted a nation to its core. Passing away at Parkland Hospital at the still young age of 46, at 2:39 that same afternoon, Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson took the presidential oath aboard Air Force One as it sat on the runway at Dallas Love Field, in front of 30 eyewitnesses, including Jackie Kennedy, who still wore clothes stained with her dead husband's blood. 7 minutes later, Air Force One departed Dallas for its return flight to Washington, carrying with it the slain president's body. Less than an hour after JFK's murder, 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald took the life of Dallas police officer J.D. Tibbet, who had stopped Oswald near the suspect's Dallas rooming house. 2 days later, while Oswald was being moved from Dallas police headquarters to a more secure location, the suspected assassin was himself slain by strip club owner Jack Ruby, which in turn laid the groundwork for years of speculation and conspiracy theories regarding who ordered the president's assassination. On November 25, 1963, a nation came together to mourn the loss of a dynamic American icon, as Kennedy's horse-drawn caisson traveled from the U.S. Capitol to a requiem mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral, before leaders from 92 countries followed his caisson to Arlington National Cemetery, where he was buried with full military honors on a slope below Arlington House. At the request of his widow, Jacqueline lit an eternal flame, which still burns to this day in honor of the fallen president, making the assassination of John F. Kennedy a prescient foreshadowing of a nation's violent years to come.